Okay, thank you. Okay, so this way, in case he can check it out if he's not
Yeah.
able to join.
And
Okay,
who's Rod? I don't know if I've ever met Rod.
okay, yeah, and I saw you copied both of us, so yeah, you do know he's kind of the other land use chair, and he's an architect. He lives in the neighborhood, so he's quite familiar with, most issues, more so than lots of other people. So he's an asset for us to have. So I don't want to take up.
I remember, I haven't been paying all that much attention, but I know that the like near Northwest plan kind of did that get finalized and all?
Oh gosh, we are beyond that. So let me just catch you up to speed. So that is done, but the other thing that also happened was a design overlay has been placed on 44th, and it doesn't impact you in this particular property because you're already doing the commercial on the ground floor. But a couple of things happened. We had inconsistent zoning from Tejon to Federal. So it was like we had 3 stories MS up to like Zuni, and then it was only two. So we brought that in alignment. Now it's three across the entire corridor. And then the other part was is that existing commercial businesses, we've said, well, in it, it says that they have to maintain the commercial on the ground floor. So it
Yeah.
doesn't impact any of something new. A couple of properties
From
have already changed.
Tejon to Federal is now MS3 on both sides of the street on 44th.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's got a design overlay, so it's
So
consistent.
then
Half of it was.
some of those properties are residential. Did they get rezoned or did you get allowed to be the flexibility to create like could you convert residential to commercial on 44th now, I would imagine?
Yes, I think that was always the case. Well, it was always Main Street, right? If it was always Main Street, that was probably always the case. But and again, it doesn't mandate anything change, but it can. Yeah. So I think long term, the bigger issue on some of these properties are going to be is even if somebody wants to do commercial, if the lot, and actually I think they put it on only the properties, this the design overlay aspect, okay? They only put it on properties that actually had the width and depth, because otherwise, if you didn't have it big enough, it'd be impossible for somebody to create the ground floor and go up with residential and meet some of the other requirements. But what I will do, because I don't want to misstate some of these pieces, I'll make sure I'll send the design overlay information to you so then you could see exactly what's in place for the entire corridor.
Yeah, and then I know that at one time Excel, was obviously they changed the traffic lights at Zuni and part of that was Excel, kind of undergrounded some of their wire. Is there any plans on 44th to, try and kind of remove any of these eyesore public utilities?
There is not. And what's interesting is yesterday on the land use, we had another resident kind of bring up some of the maintenance problems throughout the neighborhood. For instance, and I think it kind of back to your, some of these are eyesores, some of them could be safety. And then the issue becomes whose responsibility is it? So, for instance, so near where Cherry Bean is, we've got light poles that haven't worked in ages. We don't know who put them up. Maybe it was the city, maybe it was, a district that may have been in place, but now they're defunct. Excel doesn't own them, and now they become the property owner's problem, right? So there's a lot, and there's other things like abandoned tree wells that are just holes, and we've got a knockdown meter, exposed wires. So this kind of started a conversation about, and I think this ties into maybe what you're talking about is what do we do about maintenance issues across the neighborhood and these kinds of things? And the city is like, yep, we know it's a problem, but
Sorry, guys.
hey, how are you?
Oh, of course, the 30-yard roll-off guy shows up like right before this, and I was just trying to get him out of my alley, so I apologize.
All right. So I don't know if you guys met Anthony,
No.
Rod.
Hi, Anthony.
Hi.
So Anthony's obviously the property owner of the Zuni and 44th, and it's
Yep.
coming to completion. And he was just asking about, is there any plans about removing some of the eyesore situations, maintenance situations on 44th and
That's a
in
timely
his.
conversation.
Exactly. So that's what I said. Yeah. So I was filling him in that
See,
yesterday.
you need to come to our land use committee
I
meetings.
would have liked to.
Anthony, like I know you had something else going on, but it was like that exact
Maybe.
topic was most of our conversation last night.
So,
You know,
so what I was filling him in
my
was,
primary concern obviously is the just the Excel wire that runs down 44th and also the cable and internet wire, which is just below that. In general, it's like, to have more walkable main street, in the Sunnyside neighborhood, that's like in my opinion, like a primary point of issue is just like getting this to be undergrounded utilities on the 44th corridor, because otherwise it doesn't feel like a very, walkable downtown.
Right.
Feels
No,
like,
you're preaching to the choir. I mean, like we should go grab lunch sometime. I mean, all of us like because Troopy and I have been Troopy's been doing this a little longer than I have, like generally involved, but I've been in Sunnyside since '99. So I've been here for quite a while and you're absolutely right. And I don't know how far Troopy got into explaining any of it, but there's more like as we learned last night and we were learning a lot about this, there's just way more complexity in there than simply one or two public entities doing this because there's private stuff, there's right-of-way stuff. It got really complicated very quickly.
so I think so here, and this is where it kind of ties in. So as someone raised similar issues about maintenance, while Anthony, you're talking very specific about the utilities, and the utilities could be a separate conversation because someone owns this and going after.
Troopy's Internet Connect House, by the way.
Oh, dang it. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back up. You're back up.
I'm
You
going to
just
turn my
paused.
video off. I'm going to turn my video off.
Yeah.
So there's the utilities, and then there's this other who owns the maintenance, other problems. On the utilities, I think you're asking very specifically about putting everything underground. Now, how that happens, that's a conversation I think we can have with the utilities about what's the process to do that? How do we move something like that forward?
yeah, it's just paying for it, to be honest.
Right, exactly. Who pays for it? How do we get the money?
Well,
Right.
there are mechanisms that Troopy and I are going to be looking into about how we may or may not do that, and we know it's a massive uphill battle, but it's also a battle that Troopy and I actually talked a lot longer last night than after the meeting, and just sort of like I think it's a worthwhile battle for the neighborhood, and it could really be a rallying issue because there's a lot more than just on 44th.
Right.
And ultimately, where it comes down to, we'd love to have your support and input, and we're going to need everybody in the community and neighborhood to be behind it if we even have a remote chance of getting some of this stuff to move forward.
So what we're talking about, Anthony, is looking at the general improvement, the business improvement, and the maintenance districts. So those are a set of tools. And again, I don't know when it comes to if we're just talking about utilities, that it might be part and parcel, or it could be a separate conversation and separate pool of dollars. But I think you're raising something that we need to educate ourselves on by bringing the utilities in for this conversation. But these three districts require a vote of the neighborhood, or if we're talking about just a section of the property owners, to pretty much say they're willing to put money into a fee to make these improvements. The stuff you're talking about is probably so expensive that outside of an entire neighborhood general improvement district, I don't know where the money would come from. Again, don't know if these are capital improvements or somewhere else, right? Like in 6 years, the next bond, whether we can fight for things like this on the next bond, we don't know that, but you are right there with us and us saying, how do we move forward? So we don't have all the answers, but tell us, I mean, so you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, when I talked to the utility company a few years ago about, there's when I saw them, removing. I mean, they were removing a pole, I think, to change the light at Zuni,
Yep.
and so I ended up talking to the utility company, and I think that it was like they wouldn't splice the wire, so I couldn't just pay to have the stretch of my property. So because it's like a three-phase power or whatever, you can't splice the wires. So you have to go all the way back to like it's like basically like the pole across the following street, which is I don't
Well,
know.
they would basically have to linear core the entire 44th corridor at that point and put the entire service underground.
Well, yeah, but they said, it's all doable and like it
Yeah,
will do it for you if you pay.
but
How
I've
did
I've
they,
moved I've moved telephone poles before.
Like halfway down past Wyandotte, right? Like another block past my property. And that I think was like 150,000 to underground that stretch of utilities. Um, which, is a lot.
Yeah, well, and you could extrapolate that all the way, say, from Federal to Chaffee Park, the entire, if you were going to do the entire 44th corridor,
So,
you know,
few years ago, we raised this issue of why in downtown they have places where they put it underground and why aren't they doing it across the board everywhere, meaning that's the right thing to do for lots of reasons, environmental, disaster. And what they told us was in specific areas of downtown where they had specific districts, and they may not be same districts, so don't quote me, but it's warranted and mandated there, but it's not warranted and mandated across the city in all areas. Now, this is another rod as we talk about like where and when and how would this is a question I think we need answers to, but they did say no, we can't just do it because we were asking about this ready where Inca, Jason, and all the stuff is actually happening, and why on the newest development they didn't put it underground when they were building the 8-story high rises. And the response was they didn't have to because it wasn't mandated by the city.
right. Like,
That's a
because
different fight.
Troopty and I got to tour one of those buildings during construction, and outside what was going to end up being the windows of these $1 million condos, I'm sure, like literally the power wire was like right there. Like you could feel like you could almost reach out and see all that three-phase stuff. It was crazy.
So like, but however, I do think that when we think about 44, I think we have a project plan that we work towards to figure out how to fund, which is we've got an overlay, we've got a Main Street corridor. We actually have to get everybody else's to agreement, but we could make this we want this on 44th as our main street where we're requiring ground floor activation with businesses. This is what we want to see. And I do think that there could be support for this because the folks who, and you might know them. Do you know Natural Object, Anthony, Chris, and just
Natural who?
Natural
Sorry, you broke up
Object?
again, Troopty.
Sorry, Natural Object developers, they bought the property where Semi Precious, the bar just opened up underneath, a cocktail bar, but they bought that property and they were talking about kind of a similar, issue of what do we do on this corridor? Because they've got ground floor, they've got two businesses, and they're about to have four businesses, right? So a bakery and some pasta place. So they too are interested in how do we make this corridor a vibrant, walkable corridor. They actually belong into a general improvement district or maintenance district. So this conversation, I think, for us is we really got to get everyone together. And I think this underground utilities is one aspect. Streetscape is another aspect, right? So I think there's
Yeah,
a good timely.
yeah, I mean, streetscape in terms of like lighting and things like that.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree.
Sidewalk widths, that promenade type sidewalk width, all
benches,
of those sort of
trees.
things that.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not like I don't think like Tennyson or 32nd has, promenade like sidewalks, does it?
They're a little. There are parts of 44th that are not as wide as sort of where it is, like say up here along the east of Zuni.
But
Um,
that doesn't mean
but
that in
but
the
but
right of way, we don't add lights, right? That's kind
Yeah,
of the,
look,
I mean,
lights would
right.
be lights are great. Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
so
yeah, safety.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lights are really nice and certainly an important part of all this. But it's just like, I mean, even if you could just get rid of the cable, which is the lower wire, it's like it would just feel a little different. But I mean, all of these cables and stuff are tough. It's like, I know 32nd and I know Tennyson don't have just free wire above everybody's head. And that
Right.
makes
Well,
it much different for walking.
Trupti, you had made a list of people that were people and it was multiple meetings that we'd be having with people that we'd like to come speak to us and talk about to educate ourselves more about this.
So yeah,
Perhaps like Comcast and XL and whoever else is involved in all of that. We ought to put those type of people on the list too and start to figure out where these, you know, weird maps are that mandate versus not mandate and start to really figure out on our own like what areas where we might have leverage to push for certain things.
yeah, and like I said, I think the other thing is as a community, we move 44th as a corridor that we want to see in a certain way. And this, honestly, this is probably like a 5 year by the time the next bond. However, the conversation has to start now and kind of putting in, this is what we want. Here's the things that we see, and then figure out who's responsible, how can it be done,
Yep.
where the money would come from. I think that this kind of assessment is something we're really actually just starting, and because of different reasons and not just kind of what you're talking about
Like
specifically.
the city is not like earmarking any money out there to like begin undergrounding any of this, and especially like with this near northwest plan or whatever, we're saying that our representative didn't go out and try and get any money to help the neighborhood, basically.
Well, I wouldn't put it as at that because I think, well, I know the near Northwest outlines priorities. It does not allocate money or anything. It outlines priorities. Then what happens is when there's time for money to be raised, and this is where the capital improvement pieces, or this is, and again, the funding is all over the place, right? It could be in the environmental climate resiliency, it could be in Parks and Rec, it can be in Dottie, capital improvement, and then things like the bond. So it doesn't dictate how it's going to get funded. It puts a priority. What we made sure was that we made 44th a priority. So the first aspect of that implementation was that this design overlay said we've got to have ground floor activation, and it looks different than what it did before, which is if you put a door to your family entrance, it's activation. Now it specifically says that. But now we're moving to the next step, which is, well, what this looks like for the community as an active corridor equals this, and this. And what you brought up is one of multiple pieces. And I think as a group, we need to create a 44th Avenue project that we move forward. So when the time comes to find money or money becomes available, we turn around and say, we've been discussing this for the last 4 years, and here is something we think is shovel ready, or we think that we know what, the total cost will be. We just need the money. And
Yeah, you
so,
basically, and then you have to, when you tie it back into the NPI and all of the near Northwest stuff and Blueprint Denver and all of the priorities that they cite and all of that.
we have that.
And
We
we have
have
that,
that first piece.
but like any project that we bring up that we're going to want to eventually find some sort of funding mechanism for, that gives us a leg up by having that prioritize that stuff fall into
Correct.
those buckets that have already been pre-prioritized, and so it legitimizes it within, to get political pressure to start pushing that direction. And then, everybody wants to have the justification about where this money, when the money does have a venue to come from, well, this is why this project is being funded, is because it's justified in like plans that are part of the future growth of the city. So
Right. And I think
um
where we can
well, I
fit
mean, all of
in,
these different moving parts, we I think we need to incrementally move forward, gather all the information, the data, so we can find out what mechanisms are best to start, and my guess is it's going to be quite a few different things. Not just one thing that solves all of this, because as we learned yesterday in talking to Melissa from Amanda Sandoval's office, like none of these entities that we're going to have to be dealing with like one another, and they all want to point the other finger at
Right.
somebody else about whose responsibility is what, because nobody wants to do it. Like, and so we have to be the people that kind of bring all this together and start to really make it happen.
And I
Um,
think the important piece for us is that we get community and property owners buy-in. That's the piece that we need to demonstrate. And
yep,
so it's kind of like we're working on our mini plan for this corridor, and we have buy-in from people like yourself and others saying it's the right thing and this is what we want. So getting that buy-in, putting something together that says, here's the pieces, and us assessing that, yeah, they're possible. Yes, we've got a dollar amount associated with it by doing that legwork. This way, you could bring something like that forward to Councilwoman Sandoval to then bring it forward into the capital improvement piece, if that's where it belongs, or any of the other funding sources. So I think the legwork is what we're talking about here, and like timely conversation because we just started this conversation yesterday saying we got to take on the legwork for a couple of these pieces. And I think 44th, Rod, even I think 44th is a great example. Rather than going for an entire neighborhood, right? A 44th might be a good example as a start because we already have guidance in these documents about
right.
the prioritization. So
Yeah,
that's where I think
absolutely.
we start. And remember, we did a walk on that corridor to even call it our corridor to put it into NPI. Now we're saying we're moving it forward. Step one, people wanted it. Step two, it got into NPI. Step three, design overlays in place. Step four, what are the next set of improvements? And getting buy-in, having those meetings, documenting those meetings, surveys, votes, things like that. That's the stuff that the city then looks for to say, you're telling me you want this. Where's the proof that the community is in on this?
Right.
So that's the legwork that we would have
And
to.
and what Anthony, what she's talking about there is these general improvement districts or business improvement districts, or I forget what the third one was. These tools and mechanisms that have it. There is like a general improvement district on the eastern end of Sunnyside's 44th corridor up there that
It's a
was,
maintenance district.
or a maintenance district. And the idea of some of these things is whether they're funded by just the properties that are along 44th. The issue with that is that family homes that are still scattered along there, and gathering, taking that load and putting it on those few properties, puts, might exceed what any of those people are willing to put into that. It might, because that's a lot of infrastructure, and like you've already found out, it's super expensive to do things
Versus,
like this. Whereas we had some discussions last night, we were like, well, maybe it can be the entire neighborhood of Sunnyside. And I think that sort of popped up because in my mind, how can I argue that improving 44th doesn't improve my experience in the neighborhood, even though I don't live on 44th? Walking over there would be a better experience and makes my neighborhood better. So why wouldn't I have to pay? And a few of us raised our hands like, yeah, we tax ourselves.
so
I'm
yeah,
not even sure what the mechanism would be. It's not a tax. I don't know if it would
yeah,
be
we
some
don't, it might be a fee.
fee or
However,
something,
it would
but
mean a vote of
it seems like
everyone.
if the whole neighborhood contributed of property owners, it's less onerous on the, or maybe not even feasible for just the property owners along 44th to maintain it. It would like lessen that burden if it was distributed across a wider pool.
Yeah.
But that's a big ask too, because you're going to get these naysayers that are like, I don't live on 44th. Why am I paying for, improvements on
So I,
44th?
I actually think the general improvement at the neighborhood level is actually slightly more doable than only doing a maintenance district on 44th because it's a small pool. You need, well, basically what we heard yesterday is we need 30% of the property owners voting yes. So that is 30% of all property owners. Some of the property owners are the city, some of them are industrial, obviously, and then we've got, seniors and everybody in between. But 30%, to me, that might be more doable because of where we are today versus where we
Right.
may have been 20 years from ago in terms of people with either money or the desire to make improvements. So I think even though
Yeah,
that it's a uphill battle and a lot of work, it might be doable. What we don't know is when we do something like that, what do we have to outline as what it's going to cover and not cover? What happens when 44th is done? Can we move on to another corridor? And who has a say in the projects that get funded? We don't know some of this, and that's the education that Rod was talking about is over the next 3 months, we're planning on inviting people who either maintain these, the city, because we do know people, and Cherry Creek is currently moving towards, the neighborhood association is moving towards a general improvement district. So now the neighborhood association is doing something we're talking about. So we're going to bring them to the table and ask them, well, how did it go? What are the challenges? How long has it taken you? So we're working on this. I don't think there's a short-term answer though. In
Yeah.
short term, the answer is it's not going to get done.
Anthony, when you talked to, you said it was a couple years ago, you talked to Elle about it. Did they ever discuss, or did you find any information on like their maintenance cycles or anything on the utilities along that corridor?
I really didn't. I was trying to find a
Well,
email.
because I've been in other situations where, like, I worked out in Florida as well, where I've had discussions with utility companies because I have clients who don't want to see power lines and stuff. And we found out that in this one area, like generally speaking, down in Florida, because of the hurricane risks and everything, like the general direction is everything is going underground, right? Because above ground lines are susceptible to wind damage and
We got
everything.
wind, yeah.
But they're doing it in such a way, and the utility companies are doing it in such a way that they're hitting the ones that come up for like regularly scheduled, 25-year maintenance cycles or whatever it is that the corridor like lasts. And when they do that, that's when those are going underground. And so they're like, you might be able to sort of like look into, well, they were going to be doing maintenance upgrade stuff on this stuff anyway. And generally speaking, the power companies like their stuff underground anyway because it's easier to maintain and safer. Especially the way things are with these microbursts and windstorms. Power like it gets damaged all the time. The above ground lines. We may be able to sort of work with them and accelerate their time frame for getting that stuff underground if they have some sort of plan for a regularly maintenance along that corridor. We just need to know what that information is.
Yeah, we've outlined a lot of people that we have to set up meetings with and talk to kind of even get to like, okay, we're kind of assessing. So I would say what you're bringing up and what we've just recently been talking about is kind of, we have to do this big assessment of what are possibilities for us to do some of the things that I think most of the neighborhood would want when it comes to paying fees. I can't speak for
Yeah.
people on that one. But
Nobody's gonna vote for paying more money, I would
no,
imagine.
I mean, there were a couple people raised their hand yesterday on residents, but for the most part, I would assume a lot of people are going to say no. But again, a
We,
fee,
we we have people in the land use committee that bring up topics that are all sorts of plans and all of them are, seem good, but they all have money associated with them. And there's usually somebody in there that's like shuts them down immediately. Like, nope, there's no funds for that. I mean, like right now in the city,
yeah.
there is no funds for anything. Like the minute you bring up anything about money, that you just stopped the conversation because they know there's no funds for anything. So
And the bond just passed. If this type of project that we're talking about was fully vetted and baked, and we were able to say, we've talked to everyone, we've taken votes, we have talked to the city. If this kind of stuff was that to that point, that's where we would push for it to become a priority. And we're not there, but I think that's one,
that's
that's
the
one
that's the
avenue,
direction. But it's what is the next
at least 5, 6 years, if
5, 6 years is
more.
the next cycle for the bond cycle.
But
So
we don't know. That's just the bond cycle. That is not looking at this general improvement district one or
right,
any other funding source.
mechanisms, right?
Exactly. That's just one of them. So I think there's this whole funding question and how do we get stuff done is a broader conversation. And I think our group needs to, engage more in the money side of these improvements.
Well,
So
because we've always talked about these calc micro grants and stuff, which aren't even going to touch this, but they all have like categories like enrichment and street improvement and all, like all of those different sort of things that we're still talking about. Granting mechanisms within that world that are doing the same type of elements.
But
Because
these are
obviously
like
we're talking
small.
millions of dollars,
Yeah,
not
but these are
not 1,500.
small. They're funded. We don't even know whether this whole thing gets shut down by next year because of, the funding, right? So they get
Right.
funded to do this. Basically, we're talking about $1,500, sorry, $2,000 that an organization. So they're like these small little things that you can do to engage community, get them out on, walking more, biking more. But this doesn't fix infrastructure. That money is not infrastructure money at all.
No, 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 no. I know with the micro grants, it's not infrastructure
They
money,
could
but
pay
I'm
for
just
meetings.
saying other grant operations besides the micro grant program, are there other
Correct.
grant things that you could go to with shovel ready project type things?
Yep. And that we don't know. And I think
Yeah.
that's what we're trying to assess that now. So, Anthony, I don't know, does that kind of answer your
Man,
question?
you got to have Chris fix that
Yeah,
internet.
so here I got one thing here. I'm just doing some Googling here, and it says recent agreement between Xcel Energy and the city of Denver. The agreement outlines that Xcel Energy will invest 1% of its annual revenues collected from Denver communities to underground overhead power lines within the city right of ways.
Nice.
Right. See, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not a mandate like Trupti was saying for per se, but it is a general direction that all utilities are going and all municipalities is going to underground. It's
It
sort
is.
of like
What
the
I,
So
new standard.
what I
we
was
got
saying was there are
you
areas
gotta, you
like
gotta be
Blake.
people in the room for that 1%, huh?
Yeah.
Right. No, but I mean, this is that
Because
Excel
it,
conversation.
because it all, I hope they prioritized our 44th corridor in the design plan or whatever.
Well, that's the stuff where a loud voice, when we start
Correct.
putting these, when we start putting these coalitions of people together and we bring this shovel ready design to the table, that we can start putting pressure on them and say, move that to the top of the list. Here it is. We've got it all laid out. Like, here's all the metrics. And we think this deserves your focus. That's the type of stuff I think we need to angle for.
Mm.
Yeah, that
Particularly
is
if you
good.
can pair those things up, like if we can get Dottie involved and we can do all of these things and we say, look, we have a comprehensive plan for this that we need all team players to be on board with. And, that's when you start to get people motivated to sort of come around to seeing your vision.
Yeah, this is brand new. April 25th,
Yeah,
2025.
that's
Excel
excellent.
$2 billion plan.
Well, how many
So maybe
million?
let's put on
This
the
is
top of our list, Troopty, to get
correct.
an Excel person to come speak to us.
Correct. And that's what, and so the other thing, like, and this is like for Rod, but also you, which is, community brings so many various things in the big picture. They're all aligned, but in an effort for us to move one thing, we may have to look at this as the underground piece of it only and fight that with the Excel priority. That looks different than maybe city funding to, or, a maintenance district
I
for the
mean,
lights.
it's like, look, if they're undergrounding all the utilities, I'll pay for the light in front of my place.
Right, right. Well, yeah. Actually, no, that's the other thing. We also are trying to figure out, if new lights go up, we want to make sure that they become part of Excel, which actually becomes part of a Denver city contract with Excel, because you say, yeah, you'll take care of it. The next owner is like, screw this. I didn't say, and so there's those types of things that could happen, which is why we have busted lights that nobody owns. At some point, somebody took ownership, and then that ownership is now lost.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know, but again,
I
there's
appreciate
probably
that though.
to get the business improvement take care of, I
Correct.
would think.
Correct. So there's multiple stuff going on. But I think this underground piece that you're talking about for that entire corridor as a part A of that vision. And if it's something we can really go through Excel to do, then we could move forward on that independent of whether we get a district or we find other funding mechanisms or wait for the vibrant, next bond issue. This could be a one-off, but part of that bigger picture.
Yeah, see, and I'm doing some Google search just on like programs and stuff. There's a $5 billion federal program to enhance the resilience of electric grid. Like, I mean, you start looking outside, and that means burying cables.
Yep.
There's like five or six these section 11105. Um, there like a lot of these programs, federal transportation enhancement programs, state and community block grants, local and
And
state
how much,
community improvement grants. I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of mechanisms that burying cables would be tied into in terms of landscaping and improvements for main streets.
yeah, so I think that's, so I don't, I don't know, like, how, I wish there were, folks who wanted to just take, this on as a project, to do for the community, which is move, find money, find different sources available to communities or to cities and work on it. It's like Rod and I and maybe a couple other people. So I think that's what takes up even more, like how much longer it'll take. And had you not been talking and Googling, we hadn't gotten to that information yet.
Yeah,
But
like here's one. Independence, Missouri used some funding through FEMA to be able to do it in their downtown district because it met the improving this electric grid kind of shit. So it seems like there's a lot of different things we need to look into.
right.
Yeah.
So I say, 44,
I think I mean, it's starting with Excel, right? It's like,
I
I
think
mean,
for this particular thing, it's Excel as the starting point, correct?
Yeah, but it looks like several companies. I'm finding two or three that used FEMA funds to actually get it done. Um,
And we don't know.
not that FEMA's doing great right now, so who knows?
Exactly. And we also don't
probably
know that Excel isn't.
federal money is going to be even harder to get right
I
now.
know. That's what
Right.
I was thinking was that federal money, the stuff you're seeing is probably left over from Biden and Doge didn't get there
Well,
yet.
but that's the part of this. The stuff that they have cut is you got to think of it as like it's got like a lag time because I work with the National Science Foundation and they've got funding that had already been allocated that's still trickling through the system and they
Yep.
still looking for things to spend it on. Now their budget did 58%, but the funds that had already been previously allocated are still out there managing projects. So, there could be something like that if we get on this and start finding things.
So,
It
so I,
takes, several years for all this stuff because they push this stuff out like years in advance.
Yeah.
so we want to be cognizant of time here. So Anthony, I just want to make sure your primary, your primary point for discussion
In,
today
in
is
general,
underground utilities
yeah,
for,
in general, I think that the biggest obstacle the 44th Avenue corridor faces is to becoming a more downtown like area in regards to like, in comparison to like Tennyson or 32nd is, above ground utilities. It is a huge detractor from the walkability. I think it's the primary detractor. Um, and yeah, I mean, to me, it's like if you can do that, if you can get that done, I think that a lot more like development will happen. I mean, I think that there's development is happening, as you can see, and but if you can get that done, I think it speeds up the process of changing this corridor into a much more walkable and desirable place to do business.
yep, agree. And so
Yep.
I think for us, we need to be, we need to start a project plan for 44. And this is one of those bullet points of, here's one of the things we want. And then Excel is the first conversation on that front, along with other stuff, the improvement districts and such. Um, Switching gears a little bit, Anthony, how is it going in terms of who you're getting for, I heard rumors already, so because people talk to the contractors and then they called me and said, I think this is happening. Where,
What did you hear?
all right, I'll tell you. Okay, I heard a tap room in the garage, a beer garden, and a restaurant in the new structure. That's what I heard. Okay, I don't know if it's true. And tell us where you're at and tell us when you're ready to share. I'm sure the community is generally barely, uh,
Tap room is very interested in the smaller buildings, and I told them I wasn't going to lease it, and until I figure out what's going to go in the larger building, the one on the corner.
yep.
Um, I've got a meeting on Monday with a chef that's interested in doing a project there. He's a James Beard award-winning chef, so I would be thrilled to work with him.
Wow,
And
that would be
then
amazing.
we've also talked to this group that runs like it's almost like their markets, their markets and wine shop, and
Hmm.
also like they have a grill and pizza, and they kind of do a lot of things. And just trying to figure out what concepts we like the best and what's gonna fit the best in the neighborhood. And yeah, I'm not, the tap room people, I think could work great over there. Um, but like, they're the least funded of all of these people. And then, when
Mhm.
I told them that I wanted to lease the other corner, they, yeah, we had a meeting, and they kind of had these other people, these kind of friends, or maybe other clients of the broker, and it was like, they were, kind of like dive bar operators, to be honest. And
Oh, I don't think we need
Oh,
another one of those.
I was like, I don't think that's it.
All right. So that little the original A-frame in the middle, are you have is that going to be used for like a shop front? I'm angling for a ice cream shop because I keep hearing people talk about ice cream, and I'm wondering if that, would fly and whether that's on your radar.
Yeah, I mean, it is on my radar. I mean, I too think it's a perfect little spot to serve coffee and ice cream and stuff out of. It's very whimsical, and
It's small though.
what?
It's small.
hey,
That's
my
the
son
only
works at the can. You can make an ice cream shop in a small space.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the little man's tiny as well,
that's
obviously.
true. But
And it's
he's
their
got
and it's
manufacturing
their
down
best
there.
and it's still their best performing location.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I kind of honestly hope that the James Beard thing, works because this is one of the things that I think is important and a good example is Wolf's Taylor. A lot of people were like, Sunnyside, who's going to go there? There's no foot traffic. But if you have a destination, people show up, right? They're going out of the way and
Yeah.
going because there's a name and there's recognition,
And
versus,
I also do think that, like, in general, I really do want that area, or that corner, to have kind of all day programming. So it's a conversation I'm having with this chef as well, because his restaurants are generally dinner only, but it's
uh,
like, I think that especially on the weekends, that corner kind of demands having some, all day programming, whether that's breakfast in a bar or something, I don't know.
well, thank you. And I don't know what we can share or not share because obviously nothing is set in
Just
stone.
a fixture. Yeah.
There's nothing there, but definitely when you are, closer and you're signing agreements, please let us know when we can start building some, enthusiasm and opening and all that kind of stuff. We would love to be as an organization, we'd love to help promote and be.
Yeah, as soon as I, move forward with anything, you guys will be as close to the first people to know as anybody. And yeah, I mean, obviously, want to get the community behind it, and trying to, be a good steward of this property for the community. And I think that we'll find a really good fit that'll make a lot of people happy.
So maybe last question for me. Are you finding it hard? Because, a couple of years ago when other places were, looking for tenants, they were like, it's taken a while. And I don't know whether you're having a better time. It could be your connections, obviously, but, do you foresee a prolonged, getting a tenant in place? Or, a lot of people like, are thinking that, they want to get in there.
Yeah, I mean, we got an LOI from the tap room. Um, in general, it's like the real estate market right now, and especially for retail, is like, you know, it you can get somebody in there. It just depends on how much tenant improvement you want to pay for. Um, Yeah, I mean, I think that Sunnyside presents its own challenges,
Correct.
um, for sure. It's not as desirable as Lodi or Tennyson or
And which is why I think like a destination type of place, is going to do better than one that relies on, let's say, foot traffic to fill in, right? If they're relying on foot traffic is missing lower, it'll take a while, right? Long term, sure, but can they last that long? So versus somebody who either already has a following, and they're able to leverage their, social media and marketing and because they're already a well-known thing. So I think that's one of the things that, I'm hoping you get someone that becomes a bit of a destination that kind of helps everyone in the area. And also, they know what they're doing versus, startups sometimes struggle, they have the best of intentions and are hopeful. So hopefully you find someone who is, who's already has some kind of leverage in the market to pull a draw.
I hope so too.
All right. Um,
Cool.
what we'll do is like this is on our list of priorities. When we are having conversations specific to utilities or 44th, Anthony, I'll make sure you're aware so you can join these conversations. Does that make sense?
Out, Tripty.
Sorry.
I
Um,
appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. I'm sorry. Did you hear that? I mean, as
Yeah,
I
yeah, we
said,
got it.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure you're in the loop because we want to definitely get your perspective. And I want, it's something you're bringing to us. So we want to keep you included. And hopefully you can help us when the time comes to talk to other business owners on this corridor that you'd be willing to, talk to them because sometimes a message coming from another business is a little bit more impactful than the message coming from residents. So hopefully you'll be open to helping us kind of move towards this kind of final goal that I think we all are all want.
Yeah, and if you do talk to other property owners along there and businesses and stuff, like we have to start rallying that support. So let's start getting this group of core people to start building this, coalition of people that can really help put pressure because we're going to need to do that eventually,
Yeah.
and really start building that momentum.
Yeah, and we could help on the having the platform, setting up the meetings, finding the location, sending out the invites, so we can be a part of that. So yeah, just let's just stay connected. I think this is important, and it's on our radar too. So appreciate you bringing this to us, and looking forward to working with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. And
Great. Thanks, Anthony. Nice to meet you.
likewise, Rodney.
All right.
Okay.
Hopefully you get some sleep with all the the newborn and
Yeah,
the
congratulations, by the
children.
way.
Thank you. Yeah, our third one, so we kind of know what to expect, but
True.
Yeah, it's still, but you're older and it's just
on
that
the
much harder. I'm on the other end. My kids are out of the house now, so we've
okay.
been through it. And so like yeah, but I still remember those days. Sometimes fondly actually. It's
Yeah,
wild.
I believe it. No, they're great. A lot
All
of
right.
work, busy, but no, they're great.
Awesome. All right. Well,
Cool.
thank you very much. You guys all have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.